Some of the most damaging relationships are the hardest ones to explain, and they don't have to look extreme in order to be deeply harmful. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast, where we make sense of what never quite made sense. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin moving forward. You need a coach. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. How do conversations go with covert narcissists in your life? Are you able to have conversations with them? I mean, actual back and forth, healthy interactions, give and take, actually feeling connected? Some of the most damaging patterns in covert narcissistic relationships are the ones that don't look aggressive on the surface. They happen very subtly, and a lot of times they will happen in these conversations, which we're going to talk about are not really conversations. They happen in quiet moments. And if you don't have language for it, you just walk away feeling confused, small, and somehow that you are wrong or that you did something wrong. Today, I want to talk about something that I call guard dogging. This is not a clinical term, okay? But if you've ever lived through it, you will recognize it immediately. Guard dogging is what I call it when this individual just sits by and watches for you to do something wrong and then just pounces on it like a guard dog. And this applies to you or to your children or to family members, friends, coworkers, any of that. It's like they take great joy in being able to correct someone, to discipline someone, or to teach someone a lesson, to punish someone. You know, the kids might be happily playing together and everything seems good, but if one little thing happens, one kid says something a little sharp to the other, that's all it takes. The kids might still be fine, but the covert narcissistic parent pounces on this and blows up the entire evening. They can't just simply correct that child with, hey, that was a little harsh. How about saying things a little nicer? But no, they can't do that. The one thing I've said often is the punishment doesn't match the crime. One little thing is all it takes for everything to fall apart. You might now be in an hour-long monologue of all the things you've ever done wrong, of all the ways you've always said things wrong and how mean you are. And it came from just one little thing that could have just simply been corrected. This is why everyone starts walking on eggshells around them. Their fuse is simply too close to the surface. Now, today I want to talk about how this shows up in conversations. Guard dogging in conversations is when someone is not listening to understand you. They're not listening to connect with you, to see you, to feel the emotions you're feeling. They're not even listening to resolve anything. They're listening for one purpose only, to find where you are wrong. And it's like they're sitting there, with a red pen, waiting to circle a mistake, waiting to, mark that paper wrong. It's like they're editing you. And the moments that they find it, everything else you've ever said disappears. Nothing else matters except this one thing. So I'll give you an example. You might say, hey, I was thinking about tomorrow's schedule. We've got your meeting in the morning at 9, and then the kids have practice at 5:30, right? And they respond, yeah. So you continue, okay, that's what I thought. I might run a couple of errands in between, so I'm not trying to squeeze everything in later. And you might get, okay, or no response at all. So you continue, do you want me to pick up dinner while I'm out? I could grab something easy so we're not rushing after practice. And you might get a nod or a or whatever. So far, everything feels mostly normal, which I don't know how normal conversations went for you, but often for me, it was like a monologue with me doing all the talking, at least until I said something wrong or contradictory or what they found contradictory. Then everything changed. So you continue and you say, okay, well, maybe I'll just swing by around 3 or so. That way I'm back before things get hectic. Well, here the shift happens. Why 3? That doesn't really make sense. So you continue, just so I have time to get back and not feel rushed before practice. But they say, but practice isn't until 5:30. That's a huge gap. You don't need that much time. They have now a lot of words compared to earlier when all you got were, grunts or humps or whatever. Now they have a lot of words when they can contradict you. So you continue, I know, I just like having a little buffer so I don't feel stressed. Well, now they really dig in. That's what I mean. You create stress where there isn't any. You overcomplicate everything. Why do you make everything so hard? Well, the tone has really changed here. And now you're caught in a defensive posture. You might respond saying, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I just know how I feel when I'm rushing, and I'd rather avoid that. I don't like that. Well, they continue, but you're acting like there's something to rush about when there isn't. It doesn't make any sense. You might respond, I'm just saying what works for me, and it's okay. Well, now they might really lock in on that guard dogging. See, that's the problem. You always do that. You say things that don't make sense, and then you just expect me to go along with it. You're only thinking about yourself. Well, okay, wait a minute here. Now you respond saying, but this isn't about your schedule. This is about my schedule. I'm not asking you to go along with anything. I'm just letting you know what I'm planning and talking it through. Well, now you're no longer talking about dinner. You're no longer talking about the schedule or the timing or even not feeling rushed. You're defending your way of thinking. And they might respond saying, right, but your planning is just based on faulty logic. That's what I'm pointing out here. Your schedule never makes sense. Remember the other day? And now they continue telling you all the ways that you've done this wrong. At this point, you have completely shifted from collaboration or any form of connection to correction. You've shifted from sharing your plans with them to being under scrutiny. And if you keep engaging, this usually goes in one of two directions. Either you start defending yourself more and more, trying to explain your reasoning in a way that they will finally accept, which, by the way, you're never going to reach, or you just shut down because it suddenly feels like too much effort for something that should have been so simple. How many times have you walked away from a conversation with a covert narcissist thinking that? Why did this turn into something so complicated when it should have just been so simple? What's important in this example is that nothing you said was unreasonable. There was no conflict to begin with. The conversation was just a conversation. But the moment they found a place where your reasoning didn't align with theirs, they zeroed in on it. Not with curiosity, not with flexibility, not with cooperation, not looking for, hey, explain to me why you're doing that, but with the need to challenge and correct. That's what I call guard dogging. And the reason this matters so much is because it conditions you. Over time, you start thinking, why does this keep happening? Maybe I really don't make sense. I must not be very good at communicating. Maybe I should do things differently. But if you step back and you look at the pattern, the issue isn't that you don't make sense. It's that the conversation was never about that. It was never about mutual understanding or connection. They continuously look for ways that they are better than you and pounce on the opportunities to point that out and drive it home. It was about finding a flaw in you. And once that was found, everything else becomes irrelevant. Here's another example to consider. They get home from work, and so you greet them and say, hey, how was your day today? And they respond, it was fine, busy. So you continue, okay, what ended up happening in your meeting? Well, now they have lots of words. They changed part of the project last minute, so we had to rework a bunch of things, and you might actually get a bunch of details here. Now, many covert narcissists love to hear themselves talk about themselves. Well, you're listening, engaged, interested in their day. They reach a pause, so you shift gears. Yeah, I had a pretty full day too. I finally got through most of that project that I've been working on. Well, now they respond with, oh, okay. So you continue, it felt good to make some progress. It's been kind of hanging over me. They might even engage a little bit. What part did you finish? So you respond, mostly the main section. There's still a few smaller pieces to clean up, but the bulk of it is done now. And here's where a shift can happen. They respond saying, "Wait, I thought you said yesterday that you were almost done." "Well, yeah, I was close, but I still had a decent amount to finish up." Well, now they dig in a little. "Well, that's not what you said. You said you were basically finished." And you can feel the shift. So now you respond, "Well, I mean, I was close. I just needed to wrap a few things up." Well, they won't let it go. They'll dig in even more. So which is it? Were you almost done yesterday, or did you still have a lot left today? You feel yourself tighten. Why is this becoming an interrogation? It's not that black and white, you say. I was close, but there were still parts to finish. Well, that doesn't really add up. They now get a little sharp with their words. If you were close yesterday, you shouldn't still have had most of it to do today. You might be thinking to yourself, why does this even matter? You were sharing something simple, a normal update about your day, even something positive. You were feeling good about making progress. But now you're explaining timelines, defending yourself, trying to explain your words, trying to make your experience make sense in a way that satisfies them. So you try to backpedal a little bit. "I'm just saying I made progress today. That's all I meant." But they will not let it go. "I'm just pointing out that what you're saying doesn't line up. You change your story all the time." Well, it's no longer about your day. Now this is about your credibility. And if you stay in this conversation, you will notice what starts to happen internally. You begin replaying what you said yesterday, wondering if you misspoke, trying to get your wording exactly right, trying to come up with 50 different ways to say something to find the right one that will satisfy them. All because you shared something as simple as, "I made progress on my project today." That's what makes this pattern so exhausting. It's not just conflict, it's the constant redirection of the conversation away from connection and into correction. And the deeper impact is even your positive experiences don't feel safe to share with them because they can so quickly become turned around, challenged, picked apart. So over time, you stop offering even your positive experiences to them. That's how something so small starts to shrink your voice. And then you might find yourself even defending why you don't talk to them anymore because
You're jamming your favorite song, and while you aren't missing a beat, you could be missing a signal from your body. It's an SOS from your kidneys, and it doesn't sound like music at all. It's silent. High blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and other risk factors can quietly stress the kidneys, leading to negative impacts on the heart. That's why you should ask your doctor about a simple urine test called UACR. Most miss the signal for hidden kidney disease and related heart risk. You shouldn't. Visit detectthesos.com today to learn more.
they'll say, "Well, you never tell me how your day is." Well, guess what? It's because you pick it apart all the time. Now, I want to go back to a line I just said, away from connection and into correction. This is where the impact of guard dogging becomes so significant. This is where that parent-child dynamic stays alive in an adult-adult marriage. They are parenting you, correcting you, trying to teach you a lesson. Now you, as an adult, you can begin to see this for what it is and hopefully take the steps to heal and to change the dynamic and to reduce the impact this is having inside of you. And if you need help with those steps, I am happy to coach you through that. Go to my website at covertnarcissism.com. I'm here and ready to help. But now let's talk about the impact that this has on our kids. Children do need correction. Yes, absolutely. That's a part of raising them. They need guidance, structure, and boundaries. But those things are meant to exist within connection, not to replace it. When a parent consistently functions as a guard dog, what happens is that correction becomes the primary lens through which the child is seen. The parent is not listening for who the child is, what they're experiencing, or what they were trying to communicate. They're listening for what needs to be fixed. And you need to know that has a significant impact on our children. It creates a very different environment. Imagine a child coming home from school and saying, "I got a B on my test." In a connected environment, there might be curiosity. Okay, hey, how do you feel about that? What part of it was hard? There's space for the child to reflect, to process, to be seen, to express their feelings. But in a guard dogging dynamic, the response is going to be, well, why wasn't that an A? Why weren't you prepared enough? You probably should have studied more. The focus immediately shifts to the flaw, the mistake. Now, again, correction itself is not the problem. Yes, our children need to be corrected, but it's the absence of connection that's the problem. Because what the child is left with is not just feedback, they're left with the feeling of, I'm not good enough. I have to be better. I have to be perfect. And that begins to grow inside of them and it builds over time. Another example might look like a child trying to tell a story. So they start by saying, hey, today at recess, I was playing with my friends and the covert narcissistic parent interrupts them. Friends? You mean Jake and Tyler? Those are the only ones you usually play with. Why are you saying friends like that? Okay, wait, what? Now the child is pulled out of their experience and what they were trying to explain and the story that they were maybe even excited to share and into accuracy, into precision, into getting the words just right, whatever that means, right for the covert narcissistic parent. The story doesn't matter anymore. That connection moment is gone. It just disappears. That child no longer wants to share the story because they feel like they're under scrutiny. And even worse, they feel like they're wrong. I'll give you another example. A child might say, I'm really tired today. And instead of curiosity, such as, okay, did you have a full day? Or why do you feel tired? Did you sleep well last night? Instead, they might get corrected. You went to bed at a normal time. You shouldn't be that tired. Again, the message is subtle, but it's powerful. Your internal experience is up for debate. And over time, what this does is it creates an internal guard dog inside that child. They begin to monitor themselves before they speak. I know you can relate to this if you've lived in a covert narcissistic environment, because we begin to monitor ourselves before we speak. But now our children do. They anticipate being corrected. They start editing their thoughts, their words, their feelings. They edit themselves. Not because they're trying to be deceptive, but because they're trying to avoid being picked apart. And this leads to them trying to be perfect, which they can't be. They're human, but they don't get the space to be human. And this is where that empty, painful gap begins to form. That painful gap where connection should be. Because connection is not just about being physically present, it's about being received. Being received is who you are. It's about someone hearing you and holding space for what you're saying. Even if it's imperfect, who cares? Even if it's messy, even if it's not fully accurate, you're trying to get your words together, but you need the space to be able to do that. That space should exist with the people who love and care about you. When a child does not get that, they don't just lose connection with the parent, they begin to lose connection with themselves. And that part is painful and horrible for our children. They start to wonder, do I make sense? Am I remembering things wrong? Should I even say this? And they start editing themselves. As they grow, this doesn't just disappear. It shows up in their relationships. It shows up in their decision making. It shows up in their confidence or lack thereof. Because if you were raised in an environment where connection was consistently replaced with correction, you don't just learn how to communicate differently, you learn how to be different. You learn that being known is risky, that speaking freely leads to scrutiny, that your role in conversation is to get it right, not to be real. For many of you listening, you might know this as a child as well. Maybe you grew up under a covert narcissistic parent. Maybe you've been asking yourself, why do I over-explain? Why do I second guess everything I say? Why do I feel like I have to prove my point just to be taken seriously? And it's not just about the relationship you're in now if you're here because of a covert narcissistic marriage. It might be something that you were trained into much earlier in life. When you are healing from covert narcissistic dynamics, it's not only about recognizing what's happening in your current conversations. It's also about gently noticing where this pattern may have taken root, and then to begin offering yourself something different. Because connection, real connection, is not about getting every detail right. It's not about presenting your thoughts in the most perfect way, preparing your PowerPoint with all of your explanations and the 50 different ways to say something so that things can never be challenged. That's not connection. It's about being able to show up as you are and to be met with connection instead of correction. To be met as you are, no. And if that's not something that you received consistently, it makes sense that there's a gap there. It makes sense that it feels painful, but that doesn't mean it's out of reach. It is something that you can begin to rebuild, first within yourself, and then in the relationships that are capable of meeting you there. That shift from constantly bracing for correction to slowly allowing connection. That's where something starts to come back online inside of you. That's where you find safety. Something that was never actually gone, just never fully given the space to exist. Now, if you need help with this process, please reach out anytime. You do not need to go through this alone. You are not alone. There are many, many of us who have experienced this. I thank you for being a part of this CNG community, and I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. If you've been listening, learning, and starting to see the patterns in your world, but still feel stuck in these same cycles, that's not because you're missing more information. It's because this is not something you're meant to untangle alone. There's a point where understanding is not enough, and you need support and actually moving through it. If you're there, I invite you to work with me. Your story matters, and you deserve to be heard without judgment. If you're ready to take that next step toward healing, check out my coaching services at www.covertnarcissism.com. I am here and ready to help. And don't forget to subscribe for more empowering episodes like this one. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those that she has worked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and the information provided. Thank you.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.